So let's say this happens. The Supreme Court acts, makes it impossible to run an Obamacare exchange in 34 states. What does Congress then do?
Well, I think there's a lot of debate among congressional Republicans about what to do with it. I'm in that 64% who think that Congress should act, and I think what Congress should do is offer states an option. Even if they haven't set up these exchanges on their own and thus aren't eligible for the subsidies under Obamacare, they should be given the right to opt out of all of Obamacare's regulations. There are people who have been getting these subsidies illegally, should be grandfathered in and allowed to get those subsidies whether they're in an exchange or they're outside an exchange.
Ramesh, what is the evidence that Obamacare is unpopular or not working?
Well, it has been consistently unpopular from before it passed, after it passed, and continuing on. Most people in most polls have been saying that they don't like it.
With all due respect, I have seen surveys that say the exact opposite. It might be very unpopular with Republican lawmakers, but it is not unpopular with people who've signed up for it.
Well, yes, the subset of the population that have signed up with it in many cases do like it. That's right. But the overall numbers with the public as a whole, the vast majority of them show that it is unpopular.
But let's say, doesn't the Republican Party have a consistent problem over the last 5 years, which is that despite their various, the various effective ways in which they've fought Obamacare, don't they need an alternative? It's not just enough to invalidate it through this court case. What are the alternatives?
I completely agree, and I think that there are alternatives out there. Senators Burr, Hatch, and Coburn, for example, have introduced a proposal for an alternative to Obamacare. They need more support. You've got other Republicans who are interested in lending that hand. Senator Rubio is one. Ways and Means Chairman Paul Ryan in the House is another one. But they really need to move pretty quickly because the Supreme Court is making this less and less of a theoretical issue.
Ramesh, how true is it that once a law gets going, it has its own life, its own critical mass? Are we at a point where there's no return on the Affordable Care Act?
I don't believe that's the case, partly because of the way that law is structured. The law is still a work in progress, in a sense. Over the next few years, a lot of elements of it go into place. The Cadillac tax, the Medicare board, the individual mandate starts kicking in and then strengthening. The risk corridors go away. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to change with this law. It isn't too soon to say, I think, that it's entrenched.
I just think it's a strange starting point, Brendan, because obviously this was a drafting error that the Republicans are trying to exploit.
It is, but let's just say for the sake of argument that
at all.
Sorry, go ahead, Ramesh.
It's not a typo, right? There's a reason the administration isn't making the case that it was a typo in court. It is a mistake in the sense that it was a poorly drafted law that if they were doing again, they would do differently. But the fact is, the law says what it says. The administration chose to go beyond it, and that's why there's an issue in front of the courts at all. Even courts that sided with the administration have noted that the opponents have a strong case.
Real quick, Ramesh, because we're running out of time, if the Supreme Court case does not go your way, does the Republican Party then sit down with friends and family and admit that the Affordable Care Act exists?
Well, I think that it's important to admit that the Affordable Care exists, but it's also important to note that there are better ways to structure American health care and to keep proposing that those alternatives, whatever the Supreme Court does.